everyone, welcome back to Colleen's Cozy Corner, where we are doing our 2-for-1 book review this week. So the first book that I finished this week is called Before the Coffee Gets Cold, and it's by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. It is a Japanese book that was translating into English by Geoffrey Chaucelot. Again, sorry if I pronounced any of those names wrong. So I'm just going to read a little description of what this book is. What would you change if you could go back in time? In a small back alley in Tokyo, there's a cafe which has been serving carefully brewed coffee for more than 100 years. But this coffee shop offers its customers a unique experience, the chance to travel back in time. In Before the Coffee Gets Cold, we meet 4 visitors, each of whom is hoping to make use of the cafe's time-traveling offer in order to confront the man who left them, receive a letter from their husband whose memory has been taken by early onset Alzheimer's, to see their sister one last time, and to meet the daughter they never got the chance to know. But the journey into the past does not come without risks. Customers must sit in a particular seat, they cannot leave the cafe, and finally, they must return to the present before the coffee gets cold. Toshikazu Kawaguchi's beautiful, moving story explores the age-old question, what would you change if you could travel back in time? More importantly, who would you want to meet, maybe for one last time? So I gave this book a 3 stars. I did enjoy it. However, it is, as the description kind of says, it's kind of like a collection of short stories rather than like an overarching novel. So all of the stories do take place in the same coffee shop, but it's not really like a connected storyline, if that makes sense. There is like a character or two that are present in all of the stories, like the people who work at the shop owner, that kind of stuff. But there's not like a main story. So I do like it for that. However, like when I'm reading a novel, I kind of want to read a whole story rather than just get a snippet of somebody's story. But I did think it was really interesting. So as it also says on the blurb here, so the first set of visitors is 2 lovers, then it's a husband and wife, then it's 2 sisters, and then it's a mother and a daughter. So we kind of see different scenarios of losing a loved one in some kind of way, and we see how they time travel in order to kind of get that one last moment. The first section with the 2 lovers kind of really establishes all the rules for this time travel, and as it says on here, stay in that one seat, and there is a time limit because once the coffee gets cold, you, spoiler alert, I guess. I feel like there's not really a spoiler alert because it's not a story, if that makes sense. Like, it's stories, but since it's a short story, I feel like there's not really spoilers. I don't know. That's just how my brain works about it, but spoiler alert if you don't want to really know anything about this book other than the blurb. But if you don't finish the coffee before it gets cold, you actually get stuck as a ghost. And there is a ghost in the cafe that if you touch the ghost or whatever, she curses you. So that first chapter really establishes the ground rules. So I feel like we don't get a look too much into the lover's story. And then in the next story, as it says, it's kind of like loss in the form of losing the mind of somebody because that person's still here, but they're not the same as they used to be. So she kind of gets to go back and kind of see her husband again as he used to be before his Alzheimer's kind of got to him. And then with the sisters, one of the sisters does die, so that's sad. And then with the mother and the child, the mother dies due to complications with the labor. So it's like she actually ends up going to the future to see her child kind of like grown up. All the stories were really good and really interesting, and definitely, I would say, more thought-provoking than they were like enjoyable to read, if that makes sense. Kind of like it says on the back, like, who would you want to see potentially for one last time? And that's kind of what all of these are. It's like with the lovers, you know, he's going, I believe it was that he was going to America and kind of like broke up with her before he left. So she's kind of just going to say goodbye on her terms. Same thing with the husband and wife. Since he has Alzheimer's, she's kind of like saying goodbye to who he was, I guess. And then with the sisters, it turns out that they had like a tumultuous relationship and they weren't really on speaking terms. So she kind of got to kind of like get back into her life before she dies. And then with the mother and child, obviously she gets to meet her daughter because she'll never be able to do that. So all of the stories involve loss. So it was kind of like a sad book too. Like in every story, I was like hoping towards the end, like maybe something happens where the past gets changed, because one of the rules, there's many rules to this time traveling, and one of them is you can't change the past. So for example, with the lovers, she goes back in time to, talk to him before he leaves, and she can't do anything that will convince him to stay. Like, that's the law of this time travel. No matter what she does in the past, he will always leave. That cannot be changed at all. And the same thing with like the sisters. She can't go back in time and say, you're gonna die, like don't do this, because then she'll just die some other way. So there's no way to change what happens. So that's why it was like very sad for me. So while the stories were really interesting, the conclusion of all of them was sad. Because like with the sisters, when she goes back in time and they like reconcile, I was kind of like, oh, maybe because they reconcile, something will happen where she doesn't do X, Y, and Z, so she doesn't go to the place where she's gonna die, and then she lives and they can be happy sisters. But no, she still dies. So it's sad. It was overall very sad short stories. They weren't what I want to read, and this is gonna sound horrible, but if I'm reading a sad story, I don't want it just to be like, oh wow, that was sad. I kind of want it to be heart-wrenching. Like, for example, like The Fault in Our Stars, like going into that book, you're gonna cry. Like, when I picked that book up for the first time, I knew I was gonna cry for most of the book. Obviously, it's about 2 teenagers with cancer. I was reading it as a teenager, so it's obviously very sad. So if I'm reading a sad story, I don't want to just be like mildly sad. I'm almost reading it to be sad. I know that sounds horrible, but I feel like that's a thing. Like, sometimes you just gotta kind of let the crying out, so you have to put on a sad movie or something. But these were just like really sad and such like normal situations that it's just, you just wanted them to be fixed and they couldn't be. So it's like, I don't know, unsatisfying to me. That's why I gave it 3 stars. I think it's a really interesting concept and a really interesting take on time travel. It gives it new rules that are almost realistic. Because if you watch Match Channel, the Brothers Jin, we actually did an episode on time travel, and while I enjoy time travel movies, I also struggle with them because I feel like the opportunity for paradoxes, there's just so many that when you like truly really think about it, they don't make sense. Because by going into the past, that has always happened. So if I go back to the day I was born and I say, hey mom, I'm 26 years old, blah, 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 that has always happened. My whole life, my mom will have told me a story about how she met me when I was 26. So time travel is just weird for me. So this is a way to kind of like make it very clean and not have those kind of like issues, because you can't go back, you can't change anything, you can't influence what's going on around you. It's literally just an opportunity for you to see somebody for the last time. So, and a very interesting concept, but I think it does kind of limit what kind of story you could tell, especially because like one of the rules is you go back in time, you can't leave from the chair, so you can't go explore the past, you can't go anywhere else, you're literally confined to this one location. If you pick the wrong time or date, that person's not going to be there, so you're literally just sitting in a cafe for nothing, So, interesting concept, but the format of the short story, while kind of necessary for the limiting rules, it just wasn't my cup of tea. I guess I should say my cup of coffee. Very thought-provoking rather than it was enjoyable, I would say. That's the best way I could put it. So that is before the coffee gets cold, and now we'll move on to another version of me from the future. where I talk about my next book. Hi everyone, welcome to part 2 of the doubleheader book review. So for this book, I read Eleanor Park by Rainbow Rowell. I also was documenting me reading this over on my TikTok page and also in shorts. So if you kind of want to see my thoughts a little bit throughout reading the book, you can check those out and see kind of like where I was at different parts in the book. I'm going to read the book description, I should say. This is from Goodreads. Bono met his wife in high school, Park says. So did Jerry Lee Lewis, Eleanor answers. I'm not kidding, he says. You should be, she says. We're 16. What about Romeo and Juliet? Shallow, confused, then dead. I love you, Park says. Wherefore art thou, Eleanor answers. I'm not kidding, he says. You should be. Set over one school year in 1986, Eleanor Park is the story of two star-crossed misfits. Smart enough to know first love almost never lasts, but brave enough and desperate enough to try. So that first part of the description is kind of like a back and forth dialogue that's supposed to be between Eleanor and Park. I'm trying to remember if that's actually dialogue from in the book. If not, there's definitely at least very similar dialogue throughout the book. Anyway, this is a bit of an old book. It's from 2013. So I actually did read this probably shortly after it came out, probably when I was in middle school. So when I was a teenager, probably when I would have been close to Eleanor Park's age. And I remember really loving it when I read it back then. So that's why I have the physical book right here. So it's been on my bookshelf. I brought it with me when I moved. So that to me meant like this was a book I really loved, and I remember loving it as a teenager when I read it. So I just wanted to reread it because I do reread books a lot. My favorite book series is The Selection, and I'm actually surprised I haven't read it yet this year. I usually reread it once a year. So with this book, like just kind of being on my shelf, I wanted to reread it because I remember loving it, and I'm not gonna lie, I did not love it this time reading it. I really liked the middle part, I think, where they're like really starting to, I don't even think I want to say fall in love, because I feel like they don't fall in love. As an adult, I don't really see them as being in love. I see that they like really like each other, but I don't know about in love. I think they just have similar interests. They're both kind of like the weird kid that don't necessarily fit in, so they kind of like band together. Almost not even band together because they barely are like seen in public together, but it's almost just like they have this like secret appreciation for the same things, so it kind of like bonds them together, and then it kind of leads to them, starting dating and stuff. But yeah, I didn't love it, especially the ending. If you watch my short or my TikTok when I finished the book, you can literally see me turning the pages trying find like the last page, because I'm like, there's no way this is the last page. I just feel like it ended a little abruptly. So this is a spoiler warning for this book if you're interested in reading it. Basically, Eleanor lives in a pretty abusive household. She has a stepfather who's like very controlling. She has 4 brothers and sisters, and they live, I mean, honestly, I'm imagining basically like a bathroom size, like a small bathroom, like literally just shower, tub, sink, because she describes how she could close the room to the door from her bed, but she can also like touch the window. So to me, it's literally giving just big enough to fit a bed. And all 5 of the kids have to sleep in the same room, which obviously sounds crazy because it sounds like it can barely fit a bunk bed. And Park lives in a pretty, I wouldn't say wealthy, but a pretty like middle class family. Good parents. His parents, it says multiple times throughout the book how in love Park's parents still are. So I feel like that's why Park romanticizes love so much, because he sees his parents every day like that. And Eleanor's stepdad hates her. Like, she was kicked out of the house at one time. I don't even remember why she was kicked out. I think they got into like a really bad fight, and Eleanor yelled at him and he kicked her out. The book starts with her coming back to the house and living with them again. And by the end of the book, I guess he like suspects about Park, and then ultimately finds out about Park, about her having a boyfriend. And all throughout the book, she was getting these, like, mean notes written on her notebook, and she just assumes that it's the mean girl Tina, but then she finds out that it was actually her stepdad writing these, like, honestly, things that I'm not even gonna repeat. It's like, F you, you're a SLUT, like, horrible things. And she finds out that it was the stepdad, and so when she finds that out, she literally just runs away. That's her instinct. I'm running away. She goes to Park. Park helps her go to her uncle's house that lives in Minnesota. I think they're in Nebraska. So she runs away, and then the book basically ends. And, like, the last, like, 10 pages or so is basically both of them just being so sad, and, like, they miss each other, and Eleanor's like, I'm so sad, and Park's like, I'm so sad. And Park writes to Eleanor. He says that he sends her letters every single day, just, like, basically recapping his day. He won't come out of his room. He doesn't do anything because he's so sad. And Eleanor does nothing. She doesn't write him. She doesn't call. She says, I'll call you. Doesn't call him. Doesn't write him letters. Doesn't send anything. So it's like this whole book, you have this romance, and then it just ends. And she even says in the book, like, one of her new friends asks her, did you ever have a boyfriend? And she says, no. Did you ever kiss a boy? No. If you were so in love with him, like, why are we lying about that now? I don't know. I just feel like, I will say, this is very much a book for teens. And I will say, I was looking through some of the Goodreads reviews, and I think, let me see if I can find it. So this is a review from Emily May on Goodreads. She gave it a 3 stars, which I think I forgot to mention, I also gave it a 3 stars. And I will say it does look like she also read this like a while ago and then reread it recently, because she put edit with a date. It's been 6 years since I read this book and it has not aged well. Definitely agree with her on this, that I don't think the book has aged well. I know it's supposed to take place in 1986, but I feel like there's a lot of, like, jokes or even stereotypes that are just, like, not things that would be said today, which I know it's difficult to say this, but I feel like a lot of jokes that were acceptable 10 years ago are not acceptable now, which I agree with. It's just very much a, like, sign of the times that was going on in 2013 when this came out. Like, for example, if anyone's seen The Office, like, the episode Diversity Day, that's a very funny episode, but that would never come out today. And I kind of felt similar about this. Like, even though it might have been a sign of the times for 1986 or even 2013, I don't think a book like this could come out today because of some of the jokes that are made. Just about, like, Eleanor is... she's described as being very big. However, from how I read it, she just sounds like maybe she's not a size 0. Like, maybe she's, like, a size 8. Size 6 or size 8, like a normal size, but everyone just makes fun of how, like, fat and huge, and she's this big monster. They call her Big Red because she's got big hair and she's fat, but the way that she's described, it doesn't sound like she's that big, but they're just, like, so cruel to her. And then Park is Asian, so there's a lot of, like, Asian jokes that I just feel like are very stereotypical and probably wouldn't be said today. So I just do feel like, for me, the book is outdated in 2 senses, where this is very much a teen book. I'm not a teen anymore, so I don't really I don't even want to say relate to it, because I don't think I related it to when I read it, but I feel like when you read a book like this about teenagers when you're a teenager, you can kind of, like, visualize it more, where it's like, I'm so far removed from the world of a teenager that I can't put myself there, so I didn't love it as much. And then it's also outdated in the sense that there's a lot of jokes that just wouldn't really be made today, even if they were referencing a past time. I just think that some of the jokes were unnecessary. But yeah, it was fine. I'm glad I read it for the nostalgia, but at the same time, I kind of wish I didn't, and kind of just, like, had this memory of really liking the book, because now I just have a different opinion on it. But I guess that's how books are, and I think it's really interesting that the same book can hold a different opinion at 2 different times in somebody's life. and that's how I feel about this book. That is Eleanor Park. Thank you for tuning in for my double book review. I did do a quick little checkup on my Goodreads goal for the year. It does say that I'm one book behind, so there'll be definitely another double book review in the near future, just so I can catch up on that. But thank you guys for watching, and see you next time. Bye.